welcome to our final panel here at our Zero Waste Festival, the Roadmap to Zero. My name is Mia Swainson. I'm the Director of the Festival and the Chair of Zero Waste Revolution. And I want to begin with a really great thank you to you all for being here. We couldn't do it without you. I'd also like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we are coming together today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the continuing contribution Ngunnawal culture makes to our lovely city of Canberra and our beautiful region. I'd also like to acknowledge the thousands of years of Aboriginal culture on this land and the zero waste nature of that life and how inspiring some of that could be for us. Look, thank you so much again for coming. Like I said, we can't run a festival without festival patrons, so we really appreciate it. We also can't run a festival without our sponsors, the Green Shed and 2 Before 10. So big shout out to the Green Shed and 2 Before 10. So the way this panel is going to work, I'll give a quick intro to our fabulous panelists, and each of them will give you just a few minutes. They're sort of about 3 minutes, up to minutes. We'll see how they go, keep them to time, on just their thoughts, where they're at, where their organisations are at, where they're at or their organisations are at, in terms of this roadmap to zero waste. Then we'll open the floor to questions from yourselves, and we'll have that conversation, that dialogue around roadmap to zero. What we're really hoping this will do will also kickstart this movement towards really supercharging zero waste, or accelerating, that's the word Helen came up with, not me, accelerating this transition towards zero waste in Canberra. Zero Waste Revolution is working in partnership with the Conservation Council to really put waste higher on the agenda and really start to sort of accelerate our actions there. So we're hoping today we can co-create with the panel, with you here, some ideas that will really kickstart and accelerate this process. All right. So, without further ado, I'll introduce our panel. Amardeep is a waste expert. She's an amazing woman all around and Canberra local. I'm reading what it says here. It doesn't even sell you half. She's the Asia Pacific Waste Consultant. She helps countries in our region and beyond, everywhere from the Pacific all through India, Sri Lanka, all over the country. Even in Africa, Central America, yeah, okay. And she's the head of the company, Canberran. And what her company does is helps countries and communities to reduce their waste. So advises government on how to do it. So she's a waste expert from a global perspective, but of course she's done plenty of work in Australia as well. So it says here though that she's very passionate about supporting communities to build sustainable circular economies through locally appropriate and practical waste solutions. Thank you, Amar. So shall we give her a round of applause? We have Minister Chris Steele with us. Thank you, Minister Steele. He's, of course, a member from Murrumbidgee, but he's also the Labor Minister for Transport, Canberra and City Services. So essentially, you know, where other people might have a council with many councillors, here, Chris does the job of all of those councils as heading up, you know, all of those parts of those operations in our city, which are so critical to the way we live and more, because transport, of course, would usually be a state responsibility, not local. So he's been a member of Legislative Assembly since 2016, and prior to entering politics, he was an education advocate. But I feel like since being in politics, you've been a real strong supporter of Zero Waste Revolution and also really engaged in this space. So I want to give a real shout out to you, Chris, for really coming on this journey with us and also, you know, sending people our way as well. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Minister Steele. And our final panellist is Helen Oakey from the ACT Conservation Council. She's the Executive Director, like the CEO of the Conservation Council. Her job is to lobby the government. Oh, she's got right next to her to lobby. No. And also influence the community around conservation. And we're actually trying to influence her to make sure that she works in this waste space as well. So we've been very lucky since Helen's been working on the Conservation Council. She's really elevated the profile of waste as a really key part of creating a sustainable future for Canberra. Helen has represents more than 40 community environment groups, And in her 3 years leading the organisation, she's overseen the development of really big community engagement programs like Make the Switch, Make the Move, and also the ACT Government's Plastic Waste Reduction Task Force. So she's also incredibly engaged in this space and has been for years. So shall join me in welcoming Helen. Thank you. I might just take it in the order that I introduced you. Do you feel comfortable? We'll do just a couple of minutes on this roadmap to zero, and then we'll have questions from the audience.
Okay. Thanks, Mia. Thank everyone for being here today. There are a few points that I want to make, and I'm here as a Canberra local, having worked around the world in reducing waste. So I would start by sort of picking up on what Shane said before, that I think I would politely like to say that Canberra is not a sustainable city. We've been on a journey to sustainability for a long time, and we have a lot of work to do, especially in the reducing waste space. If I was given the task to come up with the top 3 things that I'd want to do, I'd like to say that we need to redefine how we define what's included in waste. There is a lot of shift towards making the consumer or the person responsible for the waste they generate. We need to really think about what are the industries and sectors. The commercial and industrial sector, we are generating a lot of construction and demolition waste recently because of all the development work going on. So I think we need to better define waste in Canberra. We also need to support the community groups that are working in this space a lot better in supporting other communities, because Canberra is quite aware, Canberrans are quite self-aware, but it's very hard for us, even a self-aware Canberran, to understand what is the right thing to do. I would like to start by those 2 points. I think there's a lot of things that we need to discuss today. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Amar. Minister Steele.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and great that this festival's up and running post-COVID. When I took over responsibility for recycling a couple of years ago, it was just at the same time as the China sword issue, the China sword policy coming in and starting to impact on recycling and commodity markets for the resources right around the world. And I think it's really set us on a great conversation across states and territories, and also with the Commonwealth Government, who have been active in this space. It has to be acknowledged over the last few years to set out both a local strategy through the waste feasibility study, which we developed a couple of years ago, and now the national waste policy. Really excited though that this year we will be developing a circular economy strategy and action plan. This is something that we want to consult with the community on, and it is an economic development priority of the ACT. The Chief Minister just over the past month has outlined the ACT's economic development priorities and identified in that document circular economy and also sustainable building as key priority areas for the ACT to lead on. So this is something that we want to have a really great conversation with you about here, but also on an ongoing basis about what areas do we want to prioritise within that circular economy strategy to make sure that we're really using these valuable resources as much as possible and to make sure that we try and reduce the amount of waste going into landfill. There's a significant amount of work happening across government. I won't touch on all of it, but the big focus is on organic waste diversion from landfill at the moment. That's an area that, you know, it's not just about recycling this waste, it's also about climate emissions, trying to reduce the emissions coming off our landfill. It's the third largest source, so this is why it's such a critical thing. And the waste pilot out in Belconnen has started with 5,000 households. We want to roll that out to the rest of Canberra. But we need to build a new large-scale industrial composting facility to be able to take that 50,000 tonnes of waste per annum. So that work is underway, as well as a major upgrade of our materials recovery facility. Of course, the ban of single-use plastics continues. The next stage for tranche 2 will be of the straws and the oxo-degradable plastics. So we're also considering fruit and vegetable barrier bags from the 1st of July. We've been consulting about that, but there's of course opportunities to identify further products in the future of those really problematic waste streams, just to eliminate them altogether. But we also need to be thinking about those non-consumer facing products as well, and that's something that I'm really keen to talk with you about here today.
Thank you, Minister Steele. And Helen, Conservation Council.
Thanks, Mayor. Oh, that's loud. Yeah, so I think that the road towards a zero waste strategy in Canberra is challenging in some ways because the ACT is a small jurisdiction that sits in a larger framework. And I think it's really great to hear that the government's looking at developing a circular economy strategy, because after we have ticked off on the renewable energy target, there is this place where you step back and you look at what our sustainability looks like, and it's actually really quite poor. So as the Minister Attenborough in the last session mentioned, we have an ecological footprint that extends well beyond the resources that we have and the land that we use here in the ACT. So we have an obligation to extend our responsibility to those products that we consume, the things that we build, what we do when we dispose of those buildings. But I think we could certainly show leadership here and push upwards towards federal decision-making bodies and also corporate decision-making frameworks to actually get more pressure to create an easier environment where the ACT government can make stronger decisions about this. I think that we have to be really aware of where we sit in that framework, but there's certainly lots of things we can do locally. And I think that one of the things about this circular economy discussion is it's actually quite circular between corporates, governments and the community and individuals. And it's made up of individual action, government action and corporate action. And they all bounce off each other and they mess with each other's schedules. I think, Minister, that would be fair to say, because we try to do one thing and then you're held up by another thing, or it affects another aspect of it. But I think the single most powerful thing we can do is to start evaluating all of the actions and the programs and the policies that we put in place in the ACT through a lens of not just resource recovery, but also avoidance, and thinking about how we can do that better. Because in the National Waste Strategy, there is a 10% avoidance target for jurisdictions. That's quite a significant amount, but the best waste that we have is the waste we don't create. So we need to build a culture of avoidance, and that's going to require a long and strong community conversation over a long period of time. I think that a lot of Canberrans are really aware of our 100% renewable energy target, but I don't think that they're really aware of the impact that we have beyond that. And I think we could start a very wide community conversation around the ACT showing leadership in that space and being a genuinely sustainable city. And because of our government structure, I think that's a great opportunity for us.
Beautiful. What a lovely way to start. And I'm keen to hear from our audience. So I'll maintain a speaking mood. So just pop your hand up if you're keen to ask a question. Got 1, 2, okay, just 3, no, just 2, okay, let's start here. And yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I've got a question about soft plastics recycling. There seems to be a lot of difference of opinion even amongst the Canberra community about whether our soft plastics actually are appropriately recycled or not. And Minister Steele, you mentioned the China solid. I've got another related question around the soft plastics recycling facilities in places like Coles and Woolworths. I'm not sure if they're anywhere else, but it seems to me that they're services and facilities that aren't necessarily communicated very well to our community either. And it's a service that a lot of our community are perhaps not nearly so well aware is available as regular recycling and other opportunities. So, is there any more that's able to be done to raise awareness around soft plastic recycling if it is indeed recycled?
That is such a great question. I'm actually going to give them all a chance to answer, but I'm going to go Amar, Helen, and then Chris. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So because Amar can share some insight from other jurisdictions, as well as what's happening here technically. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that question, because it was the first thing I raised with Helen when Conservation Council was designing the petition, which is out there for everyone to sign, so please do sign. So I think I just want to go one step backwards and talk about circular economy and raising Canberra's ambitions on circular economy, because we talked about circular economy and then straight away went to moving things away from landfill, because just removing them from landfill is not enough. If we want to achieve true circular economy, we need to think about what actually happens and what can we put in place or advocate for in Australia to make sure that we can achieve true circular economy and reduce new materials being used and put into the economy, and sort of circularize existing materials as much as we possibly can. On the topic of soft plastic recycling, a lot of jurisdictions already do a lot more than just the Coles and Woolworths-based red cycle recycling. Lismore Council used to have a bag your bag program where all soft plastic could be put into a soft plastic bag and the pulls out before it hits the MRF from the yellow bin. The MRF is a materials recycling facility, so where all your material goes to recycle. Currently, Central Coast Council is running a trial where the exact same thing is happening, where you bag your bags, it all goes into the yellow bin, and then it's pulled out just before it hits the material recycling facility line. So we need to make it more accessible to people to be able to recycle soft plastics. What I said originally about, even though Canberra is a very sort of aware community, the people who know that the red cycle facilities exist are the ones who are going to continue to do it. But we need to definitely make it easier for people to be able to place their soft plastic in a recyclable bin, which then gets recycled. The final point I want to make, which I didn't make originally, was that I think as Canberrans, and we really need to advocate for redesign. So if we are going to design a circular economy strategy, there needs to be a real focus on the way packaging is designed to not have as much soft plastic recycling. If a recycling facility in Canberra cannot, or in Australia cannot recycle a material, that packaging material should not be entering the waste stream in the first instance. And there's a lot of examples around the globe where this has actually happened, and countries that are saying that if this cannot be recycled in my country, I don't want it to be allowed into the country as well. So it won't be new. It would be certainly following the jurisdictions.
You give an example of a product in our country. I saw Minister Seal looking like he was thinking thoughtfully.
A really good example of that is, when the China SAW happened, one of the major reasons why a lot of the plastics that we generate through recycling facilities couldn't be recycled is because they didn't say, don't send plastics to us. China said, give us cleaner plastics. A PET bottle usually has a label which is stuck onto it. It is made out of a different material, not PET, and the lid is made of a third material. So even if you placed your PET bottle in a clean PET stream only, it still didn't comply with the cleanliness requirements that China had. So even if we did the right thing, and at the moment the most right thing you could do is put it in a CDL, so to return your container, it's still not clean enough for China to accept it. In response to that, South Korea and Japan's already done it for a long time. It wasn't a response to that. They've been thinking about it for a long time. They basically said that all lids or any bottles should be made out of PET, so that all the material is the same, and no labeling is allowed as a separate material. It's a stamp on the bottle. So the PET bottle that goes into South Korea is completely recyclable as a single material. The separating material is the hardest part. So South Korea is not the only one. There's many jurisdictions that are taken up now, but that meant that a lot of that material is now coming into Australia because we have no such requirements.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, so Helen on soft plastics, and then sorry, Mr. Steele. No, that's all right. So yeah, expanding soft plastic collection is something that the Conservation Council took to the last ACT election as part of our policy platform. And I think it's really encouraging to see that there are other jurisdictions doing it, because it's always easier to think about, look at what other people have learned. What was the actual question, Anna? Sorry.
It was two questions. One was, are the soft plastics from the Coles and Woolworths facilities actually being recycled as they should? The second was, couldn't find the second one now.
That's okay.
It was raising
accessibility, yeah. And I think the thing with the Red Cycle program is it's, it must be collecting a very small percentage of what's out there in terms of soft plastic. And you have to ask how they'd actually cope if, we did actually collect all of the soft plastic from the community and send it to them. I'm not actually sure that they're, on their own, they would cope. And so they may not be wanting to extend it. But the thing is that as we collect more of these products and take them out of the waste stream, we also need to be looking at creating markets for them and potentially
government procurement processes, and I know that the ACT government have done some of this work already, starting to look at how they can use some of these products and recycle them into products that they might actually want to buy. And so that you're actually genuinely building that circular economy up. But I think it's a very exciting idea that we might be able to collect soft plastics from, using the yellow bin recycling scheme and put those somewhere. But as Amar says, we have to actually make sure they're going somewhere where they're going to get used. And there's entire layers of community education that need to go with that. So I learned the other day that your soft plastic should be dry, not wet. I thought they had to be clean, not dirty. But in actual fact, so you can see every time that we start to change what we're doing in terms of, processing, we have to have a new conversation with the community around how they prepare and put their waste into the bins. And this is why it's such a challenging space, because everything keeps changing all the time. We build a new facility and the messages change. I just want to touch on one other thing quickly, which is this idea of products that are packaged in ways that have multiple layers. So my pet hate, and I'm going to brand shame here, my pet hate is Sonoma bread bags. They come with a lovely brown paper bag with a nice soft plastic clear window. That sort of stuff shouldn't be happening. If you buy, as you say, if you buy a milk bottle, you might notice now that if you buy a plastic milk bottle that you think can go into the recycling bin, it's actually wrapped in soft plastic sheeting around the outside, and you have to cut that off if you want to put that milk bottle in the recycling. So one of the things we should be doing at a national level is really seriously looking at some of the rules around multiple packaging products, or products that have multiple types of packaging on them, because it actually makes things extremely difficult to process down the track. And it's something simple that we could fix.
Thank you, Minister Steele.
I think when people are thinking about what's going into their garbage bin, it is often people thinking about lots of soft plastics, but unfortunately, the reality is it's actually one of the smaller waste streams that we have, and that's probably why it hasn't had as much focus. And that's not to say that we shouldn't take action, because I think we should. And I do think it is at the design level, which is a national thing. I don't think we can regulate here to not have products come into the ACT or be sold here. That's something nationally I think we need to look at to make sure we're designing out as far as possible the soft plastic. We also need to be careful about what the alternatives are, and the alternatives can actually be recycled. At the moment, we're having that conversation as we go product by product through the banning process, the phase out process under the Plastic Reduction Act. And it's revealed some interesting things. For example, some of the alternatives currently can't be recycled. They can't be composted in the ACT because we don't have that large scale industrial composting facility. That will come online in a couple of years' time once we've gone through the procurement process and it's built, and that hopefully will open up some more opportunities to be able to have better alternatives to some of those products available. But of course, that'll be one jurisdiction. When we're talking about a national market, we need to make sure that we've got common standards right across the country so that we can expect the product manufacturers to be able to design out these materials and then be able to supply a product that can be recycled right around the country as well. But I think there's some clear products where there's a group of products where they can clearly move to something that's already recyclable, and they need to move quickly on those. There's probably another group of products that's a bit more in a grey area, and we need to work through what all of those are. I think to get a better understanding about what's coming through our waste stream. We will be undertaking some waste audits over the next year or so to get a better understanding about what is in the ACT, what's left in the ACT's waste stream to be able to do that.
Thank you very much.
And just in relation, sorry, one final thing on your other question in relation to is this material actually being recycled? I'm fairly confident that it is. I guess I have regular meetings with Woolworths, not so much Coles, and they certainly assure me that that material they believe is being recycled. I've also been out to talk with some of the manufacturers, the remanufacturers that are using the material, like Replas, for example, who are turning it into plastic bollards and other types of products. So I've seen the sort of end side of it as well, and that business is growing, and there's certainly, an opportunity for us to be purchasing back some of those materials to create a true circular economy. But also, I think designing out those materials in the first place would be a far better outcome.
Thank you very much. I'm dying to say something extra. And then I'll go up to, I've got a question over here.
I'm sorry, I really don't want to pick on you, Minister. I really am trying to do that. But the first thing about soft plastics not being a big part of our waste stream, they're not a big part of our waste stream by weight, but they are a very big part of our waste stream by volume. So it's depending on how you look at it, and bin capacity when it comes to volume makes a big difference in cost and pickup costs and all those kinds of things. So that's one thing. In terms of whether, I just wanted to answer the question about whether it's actually being recycled or not. I think it is, and it's being made into new products. But I hope that when the conversation in ACT around circularity happens, we will be hopefully having a conversation around whether taking something that's made out of soft plastic and making it into a bench or a shelf is actually circular, because when I think about it, it's actually a very linear process. It doesn't stop new resources being pulled out of from the earth and circularizing it and putting it back into the economy. We're actually creating a very linear product. I know that there is some thought that perhaps it replaces other material that might have been used to make that bench or that shelf, but that's a very thin argument. But I hope that when the conversation around circular economy, the strategy around circular economy happens, we will perhaps think a little bit more about what is true circularity. I mean, I really support the Red Cycle, and I think it's a great initiative, and it's something to be thought about in the short to medium term. But in the long term, we cannot be taking one material, making it into something that's going to stay in that form for the rest of its life before it ends up in landfill and call it really a circular solution.
I think we probably got to let the audience. Yeah, good point. Very good point.
Just one really quick point about soft plastics is that they're also a plastic that, as they break down, they have the potential to cause environmental damage quite quickly and quite easily. So if they escape from landfill, or if they break down in waterways, or they turn into microplastics and things like that really quickly. So in that regard, they do have quite a high importance.
You look like, okay, great. Now I want to just grab us a list of questions so that we can. So I've got you next, and then I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, beautiful. And that's probably all we've got time for, because we're due to wrap up at 1:45. We might take it 5 minutes over, but I'll make sure that we do wrap up relatively in time. Look, take it away.
Yeah, I'll try to keep mine short. And it's a question specifically for Mr. Steele. And it's really fantastic that people are mentioning the China sword policy, and that it hopefully opened up all of our eyes to the fact that everyone has been relying on those good, warm, fuzzy feelings when we do a little bit of recycling, but there's obviously a good amount of wish cycling going on, and people also like willingly not doing the right thing. So with the rollout of the food organics recycling, I was just wondering what data you have from the recent trial in terms of how many apartment blocks are getting on board, because with apartment blocks you have that added aspect of anonymity, where the recycling bins tend to be even a little less compliant than in your freestanding homes. And so are people, first of all, just getting involved with the trial and apartment blocks, and then does the level of contamination differ compared to your single family homes?
Great question. Very technical.
Yeah, it's fairly early on in the trial at the moment. I think we're in this sort of getting up to about the 6th month of the trial. So we're actually actively out there surveying, a very detailed survey, which is a hard copy and online for the residents that are involved in the trial. Not all multi-unit properties in the zone are part of the trial. We're getting more joining every day. So we're actually actively trying to work with those body corporates to get them to understand the benefits of participating. And there are significant benefits, because we know that these multi-unit properties, they often don't have composting facilities available. And whilst they don't have a lot of green waste, they do have a lot of food waste. So I haven't seen any specific breakdown about the contamination rate in the FOGO bins in the MUPs. But what I do know is that overall the contamination rate is 0.1%, which is extremely low and a really good outcome for the trial. We'll be specifically analysing that data as part of the evaluation of the trial to get a better understanding about what's working and what needs to be improved as well ahead of the citywide rollout, which, as I mentioned before, is contingent on us having the large-scale composting scale.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And thank you. Great question. Yeah.
The China soil information to how many recycling companies that the after the China soil starts to collect recyclables and come to the solution to recycle to third countries, check them on the relation connected to an ACP and so what was done after that?
I'm not sure if there's anyone who can speak for the whole of the country, but do you want yeah, I was going to say, do you want to have a crack at that one?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I think it goes to what's happened since in terms of the development of the companies and the economy around this, because it does create jobs, recycling, to be able to manage this material here rather than shipping it overseas, which effectively is shipping jobs overseas as well, and it wasn't good for the environment. So the good news in the ACT is most of our material was not going overseas. Very little of it was. It was only really that very small mixed plastics stream that was left over after sorting the other types of plastics, which was around, I think, under 2% of our waste stream in the ACT. So the good news is that won't be going overseas, and through the new upgrade to the materials recovery facility, we'll be able to sort that mixed plastic out and be able to have it properly recycled for remanufacturing, all of those different polymers sorted into those polymer types so they can go on to be remanufactured. But look, I can't speak to the whole country, but there's certainly been a complete reorganisation of the industry. It's complete restructuring that's been required, and for the ACT, that means that some of our stuff will need to be sent to interstate for remanufacturing, because we can't do it here. We don't have necessarily all the facilities here. And whilst, of course, we have that environmental principle, the proximity principle, that we should try and deal with as many of our resources as close to the site of production as possible, there'll only be certain things that we can do here, and they'll need to be done on a larger scale. So a lot of the stuff in Sydney, there's been a lot of new MRFs built right around the country with new optical sorting technology and all that sort of stuff. There's been
quick MRF, materials recovery facilities, where
all the recycling sorting centres. But there's been significant money that the federal government's put in particular, and also some of the states, into building new facilities to remanufacture this material into new products, so that there is that genuine circular economy being created. But there's a lot more work to do there. I think with our strategy here, when we develop the strategy and action plan, we've got to work out what do we want to do in the ACT? Are we going to play a role in the remanufacturing space? If so, what products are we going to do here? Now, we've got some really fantastic and innovative companies that have sprung out, and one of those has actually been a spin-off from the ANU and CSIRO that is using enzymes to break down plastic into its constituent chemical parts for it to be used again. So that's really exciting. We've got to work out, can we do that? Do we have the land available? That's a real big constraint in the ACT for us to do this type of stuff. And what are we going to do interstate? What are we going to continue to send up to Sydney?
Thank you. Amal wants very quickly.
Say that originally we stopped sending things to China to other countries, but then I think the federal government has put in a phased ban on sending our plastics out to other countries, and remanufacturing facilities are coming in, like the Minister said. So most of them interstate, but lots of money has been put into building manufacturing facilities in Australia.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Candice.
I'm Candice. I'm a designer. I founded a design charity by Scott, going to the community, and we remake of a school. And learn how to remake zero cost. The 18 months ago, it's the most plastic on the planet. And we have a whole platform that we see Canberra as pioneering then and I just it's been very hard to engage people in the community for the summit and stuff. But I'm hoping that some people look at to launch Canberra's pioneering all the safety stuff that most of us and can use for things in school art and park, maybe school desks, maybe bus shelters, maybe park equipment, and we're buying kids brand new clothes that we schools children play centers. I'd like everyone to have a look at how
Where do they go? Where do you? plasticstatic.com.au. Maybe send us an email and we'll pop it on our socials.
I'd love to project and also polyethylene just on microplastic polyethylene plants and soil and environment. So that's that information there. And food safety, and we can use resource by the ton. It is the most plastic down in landfill and most plastic down in landfill.
Thanks.
I would check it out, but my question is, I have 15 minutes to shampoo bottles, additional bottles, soda bottles, and you probably have been before when I go to recycle this.
Yeah, thank you, Candice. Can she have 15 minutes of your time, Minister Steele? I think that's where she was going. I'm sure.
Absolutely happy to find out a bit more about what you're doing. Yeah, so send me an email.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I've got Dee Dee and then up the back there, and then we'll wrap it. We've got 5 more minutes, so we're in extra time. Thank you, Dee Dee.
I've got a question for you, Steve. You just mentioned before the large scale of on your website, it says that the ACT produces about 26,000 tons of food waste. In a statement that we issued on the 25th of March, the facility says that the facility is designed to have process 50,000 tons of food waste, up to 70,000 tons of food waste. So I'm questioning why we need such a big facility if we have organizations or businesses like Group here who does community composting and would like to extend this all across the ACT. We have seen Riley who does work composting and other fantastic businesses, local businesses here in the ACT who does work composting on a big scale. Then also we have Olympia Jager and who does insect composting. So why are you designing a facility such size? And also I'm also a representative for the Southern Community Council. So I remember that in the scoping document for this facility, the Southern Community Council was stated as a major stakeholder to be consulted. We have not been consulted about the facility, not been one, not all together. And my last question is that I know that the waste contracts for sewage are coming up in 2023. And I remember that the promise was to introduce local food and organic collection for households in the ACT by 2023. But you just mentioned that you see there's a composting facility not happening in another 2 years. So what happens in the meantime? And will you support all these other local initiatives that you already had? We don't need such a huge facility. Or explain to me or to everybody else why we need such.
Yeah, happy to. So there was a detailed feasibility study undertaken in 2020 on what would be required in order to introduce a ACT-wide household FOGO collection. I think the 26,000 that you're referring to is probably what goes into our current garbage bins. But what we know from the feasibility study, I think it's around 46,000 tonnes would be collected from day one of a FOGO household collection, curbside household collection across the ACT. So we need a facility that can be bigger than that. And so they've recommended starting with 50,000 tonnes, but with the capacity and availability of land on site to be able to expand up to 70,000 tonnes as the city grows, but also as the region grows as well around us who may be using this facility. And the 26,000 tonnes may also not have taken into account the fact that we do have those councils actually providing their food waste to us as well. So that's part of our joint cooperation with the Canberrans joint organisation. So all of those Southern New South Wales councils who produce food waste, Queanbeyan has indicated and colouring that they are moving towards FOGO as well. And so they will need a place to put that material. When we go out to the market to procure this new facility, where it will be clear that our preference is an investable composting facility based on the requirements in the feasibility study, but we'll be going out to the market and asking them what they think the best way to provide this facility and composting, large scale composting facility is. So that might be a slightly different model, and all businesses that currently operate can tender through that process to deliver this facility and service. So there's also, this is just the household collection. We know we have about 8,000 tonnes of commercial food waste that currently goes into landfill. So there are huge opportunities there for existing businesses as well to service our business market, business to business, to make sure that that material is composted. And as part of the circular economy strategy, we've already committed that we would look at requiring each business to have, particularly in hospitality, for example, to have a food reduction plan in place. So they will have to start thinking about this, and we'll also consider, of course, whether a ban on food going into landfill is introduced in the ACT as well. So that is going to supercharge the businesses involved in this industry in being able to serve a lot more customers.
Thank you. Look, we're going to have to keep going. We're over time, Dee Dee. I'm very sorry. No, I'm very sorry. We're going to keep going. So a last question over here, because I'm conscious we do need to close the session up. We're already over time.
It's to be a really short question. That I was really curious about, with a circular economy, zero waste, is that compatible with our current culture of consumerism? And the answer is yes. That takes my curiosity, decide to see what the outcome is. If it's not, what are the implications of focus strategy for industry to consumer? If in the end, you just have to stop buying. Is that how it would like?
Woohoo, stop. Yeah. I'm so with stopping buying. I want to go to Helen. Is it okay? Yeah, and come and and then if you want to, you're welcome to, Minister. Helen.
It would be great if we lived in a society that just consumed what it needed, rather than a society that consumed what it felt like it needed because it was being told that it needed that by advertising and cultural norms and all of those sorts of things. I don't think it's a quick journey to become a more sustainable society globally. I think it's a slow journey back from kind of peak consumerism. But I suspect that the limits that the planet's putting on us will drive us in that direction. And I think we're seeing that at a community grassroots level. I know we're seeing it here in the ACT. It's ironic because we have people in the community that are so super aware of this, and yet our consumption and our footprint is still extraordinarily high. You know, and we all dress well and we have the latest phones and we live in nice houses, and we build really big houses here in the ACT. Like, it does my head in how big people think their house needs to be, you know, manageable. And we have a really big conversation that we need to have. And the Minister hinted at it a minute ago around land use in the ACT. And that conversation is going to underpin a conversation about how do we live more sustainably right across the board. So I think that there's lots of avenues for pursuing this as a citizen and as an activist. I do think that tackling companies directly But, you know, we have a real challenge. I mean, I know, Chris, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but, you know, we've even decided that we're going to put advertising on the side of our trams and our buses because, it's good to sell a little bit of advertising space on our public transport. But at the same time, you know, we don't have advertising signs in other parts of the city. And we all know that a retail economy is not the kind of economy that we can depend on. But if you read the ACT budget papers, you'll see that growing population and a retail economy sits inside those budget papers as being good, healthy signs of a good, healthy economy. So while we can talk about a circular economy in terms of resource use, there's a much bigger conversation around consumption and population and growth and limits to growth. And I think that's a conversation that we're going to have over the next 30 to 40 years. And you're going to be part of it, and I'm going to be in an old people's home. Hopefully.
Thank you so much. Alice, I just got 30 seconds
Really quickly.
from
Really,
Mr. Steele and Amar, just to wrap it up.
so firstly, I think there's huge opportunities here in terms of actually growing our economy through creating jobs by dealing with this material and by implementing a circular economy. That's why it's called a circular economy. There's benefits there. But secondly, regulation plays a really important role in regulating our market and the externalities that come with it. And one of the problems at the moment is that we don't have enough product stewardship schemes in place for a lot of the products that we're talking about, where the whole of life cycle costs are reflected in the upfront cost of a product from the very beginning, and that means that there's not funding to have it properly recycled at the end of use. So we need to expand that massively.
Thank you, Minister Steele. And here we go. 30 seconds.
I'm going to say something very quickly. First of all, in support of a bigger facility for organic recycling, all the alternatives that we are considering, we hope that they will be organic in nature and will need to be eventually composted or gotten rid of in a more natural way. And the second thing, just to pick up on the product stewardship scheme, I really hope that we will advocate for any business in Canberra that sells something for them to provide a recycling facility as a part of their business. If I'm selling something as a business in Canberra, I must be required to allow for that to be recycled. Technically, everything can be recycled.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Amar. Well, what a lovely end to it. That was a really powerful question to end us. Thank you so much for coming to the festival. We are doing this for you. With this conversation will continue. As we said, the government's looking to develop a new waste strategy. They're doing some data work at the moment. And of course, the Conservation Council are really going to focus on waste this year. So it's an exciting time. Make sure you sign up to our newsletter to stay informed, or sign the petition at the Conservation Council stage. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for your time. And that is the end of the formal program for the festival. Thank you, everyone.